Good day everybody, this is the Ecclesiarch here, back with another tier list, and this is going to be an updated Warlord tier list for Warpforge for the current meta that we are having right now. So apart from the fact that there have been some significant nerfs and buffs to certain factions, I have also changed my mind about a couple of Warlords from the previous tier list that I'm of course going to talk about in this one, and why I have changed my mind and why I have decided to give them a different place this time. So here's the old tier list for reference, and yeah, we're gonna take a look at how things have changed, right? So let's kick off the things with the Ultramarines. Now, Ultramarines were at an amazing spot last season. They had over like 70% win rate, which was insane, with Cgar having around 76. And as you remember, I did place Cgar and Maro Cgar in S tier, and I placed Uriel Ventress in A tier. Now, Ultramarines have been hit with some significant nerfs, unfortunately or fortunately, depend on whether or not you're an Ultramarine fan. Some people are saying that they're unplayable now and that they're trash. I would generally disagree with this hard, because I believe that the Ultramarines are not unplayable. They're pretty okay right now, but they're certainly not what they used to be. They're a shadow of their former selves. Now, the main nerfs to them were the fact that they don't have such a great lethal range anymore, and some of them, their main tools like Octavio, Inceptor, and stuff like that, and Angels of Death have been nerfed. Now, with Maro Cgar, I am going to place him in B tier. Now, the thing with Cgar is he's a pretty good Warlord as it is, because he still has his card draw, he still has 40 HP, and Ultramarines still have a lot of tools at their disposal, because essentially, they still have a lot of cards that are really good. If you remember, I always said that Ultramarines were suffering from success because they had too many good cards and it was hard to decide which cards to include. Now you can include the other good cards that can replace the old ones that have been heavily nerfed. Now, the thing is, it's not just easy to play them anymore. Now you actually have to calculate, now you actually have to play carefully, so you can no longer just bash the keyboard with your face and just see everything go well. So I believe that I would place Cgar in B tier, and right above him, I think I would place Maro Cgar. Once again, I think that Cgar is the better Warlord, and especially in the current setting, I think he's better because now the flexibility of his ability is going to be even more important, because it can help you do some crucial trades, it can help you do some important stuff. Like, I would say both of these Warlords could have a potential to be A tier, at least Maro would. It's just that the current meta doesn't really allow them to be placed any higher, in my opinion, because they're not going to be able to outpunch some of the very strong things that are right here, right now. If the current kings of the meta receive some nerfs, we might see Ultramarines rise one tier again. Now, Uriel Ventress, you know, the thing with Uriel Ventress is that he does suffer from not having the advantage of his let's say superiors, so I am still going to place him one tier below. So if they were S tier and Uriel was A tier, now I would say they are B tier and Uriel is C tier. Maybe even Uriel would be at the bottom of the B tier, but I think that with the heavy nerfs, also plus the fact that Uriel is not like overall that strong compared to the other two, he probably deserves a C tier. I might actually be wrong. I might actually even, you know what, I'm actually gonna place him in B tier for one single reason, but he's gonna be like at the bottom of it. Nah, actually no, I'm gonna be like unfair to do that. Like right now, I think that Uriel is in a pretty bad spot. Now, coming in at the first S tier place is going to be Oricon the Diviner. Now, Oricon the Diviner has been S tier, like in the previous meta as well, and he's still S tier. Now, Oricon the Diviner is S tier because he plays Scarabs, and Scarabs have not been touched at all. Now, on top of that, Scarab decks might actually be good against the Orc decks, because if you do swarm the board first, you might be the one who keeps the board under control. Now, the nerfs that the Necrons have received to Tomb World and Lich Guard, as well as the adjustment to the Psychomancer, has absolutely no effect on Oricon the Diviner, because the only card that he probably used from there was the Lich Guard, and Lich Guard still performs its duty quite well. So the Tomb World doesn't affect him, Tomb World nerf, he doesn't really care about the Psychomancer adjustment, he just plays Scarabs and it's very hard to deal with. So this is still an oppressive Warlord that probably is gonna get some changes later down the line, but right now he still remains an S tier. Emotech, I would say, moved down 1 tier to the bottom. Now, you'd be surprised because the Ultramarines, which was probably the hardest matchup that Emotech had, has been nerfed. And why does Emotech go into A tier? Well, it's not that the nerfs affected him badly, but there are a couple of things that were a problem for Emotech. The number one problem is that right now Orcs are meta, right? Orcs are very powerful, and that puts Emotech in a pretty bad spot because he always had a little bit of trouble dealing with Orc aggro. And right now, dealing with Orcs is even harder, so I think Emotech is not the best pick you would want to take. Also, he has now been weakened against the Tyranids because Tyranid stealth is now very hard for Necrons, considering the fact that the Psychomancer no longer stuns a random unit and has to be targeted, which against some matchups is a buff, but against Tyranids it's a nerf, so Emotech definitely is going to feel that situation a little bit. So he moved down a tier, in my opinion. Now, Nemesor is going to stay in C tier. Nothing really changed for this guy. He used to be C tier and he's still gonna be C tier. He's not trash, but his ability is just vastly inferior to the ones that the other 2 Necron Lords have. So obviously he just stays in C tier. He really doesn't have the tools necessary to do anything crucial right now. So we'll see how that can change after he receives some minor adjustments. And now we arrive to the kings of the meta, which are the Orcs, and Ghazghkull, right from the D tier, moves on top of the S tier. So Ghazghkull is the strongest Warlord right now, no competition there. He is the absolute best. I guess it suits the prophet of the war, but the thing is, the main thing that changed about Ghazghkull is that one of the problems he had was that his ability was nigh useless until you had units on the board, so he really just was sitting there doing nothing for a turn or two, and then he would rely on just getting a good green horde. Now his ability summons Grots, and he has unending tempo with that. If he goes second, he can summon 2 Grots on turn 1, and he can still use his ability to buff his unit situationally. The Orcs' oppressive abilities like the Green Horde and the Makari Abuse have not been changed either, while the Orcs also received some buffs on top, with Squeak Buggy being buffed and Vehicle Orcs being buffed. So Ghazghkull is just on top of the food chain right now. I would say followed by Gruk the Face Ripper, who is also S tier. Gruk was like A tier in my opinion last season, but now he would like move up to S tier considering the buffs to the Orcs and considering the fact that the other factions received some nerfs. So Gruk is still a beautiful pick just to take and just to smash through enemies. In some situations he might even be better than Ghazghkull. His ability is really good, and overall a pretty reliable Warlord on both control and aggro if you want to go. And there's like a ton of variety you can choose with these Warlords. You can play a vehicle deck, you can play a swarm deck, control deck, aggro deck, like whatever you want. These 2 Orcs are right now the best. With Boss Zackstroke, he's gonna go into B tier. I would even say that he's worse, in a worse spot than the Ultramarines. It's just that for him, nothing really changed because his ability is just flat out aggro, and aggro Orc didn't really receive any changes. He is what he used to be. The problem with him is that he lacks any significant like ability. The only good thing about his ability is that he can take out flyers really easily. You just have to play brainless aggro with this, but unlike Gruk the Face Ripper, he has no consistency because he cannot draw cards. So it's much harder to play Boss Zackstroke right now. He's still okay though, he's pretty nice, just like the Ultramarines, because he can keep bashing, he can keep dealing a lot of damage, and he has a higher lethal range than other Orcs, so he can still definitely work and do some stuff. Now, as for the Chaos, and Chaos, you'd be surprised, is in a much better spot. Now, when I saw the patch, I thought that the buffs would not have been enough, but I think that Chaos is in a pretty good spot right now, but mainly this is due to the fact that they are good against the Orcs. That's one of the things that really makes the Chaos special. Why are they good against the Orcs? Because they have good AoE, they have Spawn them, they have Helldrake Assaults, so they're actually pretty nice when it comes to dealing with Orcs. And Abaddon is going to move from C tier to A tier, I would say, followed by Harken Worldclaimer. Now, some of you might say, no, you're like overrating it, like Chaos is not that good. Chaos is that good. The main problem with Chaos players nowadays, I think, is that they choose to play like for big board control and buffing their troops like crazy for a one-shot and playing Dark Apostle into a powerful board. That's not it. The whole point of Chaos right now is that some of their units are pretty powerful, like the Execution Master. You got the Spondum, you got that Nurgle unit that gives vulnerable 1 to everybody, so you can actually deal a lot of damage to the board and the enemy Warlord, and you can then have some very good finishers like Heldrake and Drachnian. The whole thing was not that their big units that were buffed, the whole thing was that their small units were buffed with health, like for example the change to Noise Marine, the change to Possessed Marine, the change to the Possessed Champion, or whatever it was, the legendary with the flank. And on top of that, Abaddon received a very important change, just like Gaskul. So his ability is no longer dead in his hand on turn 1. He can now use it to gain health. So that's a very significant buff to Abaddon, because I think that really does put him in a much better spot. Now, I still think that Imhotep is slightly better in general. In the matchup, I think the matchup favors Imhotep, but against the Orcs, I would say the Chaos Warlords are the best pick. Harken Worldclaimer, also very underestimated. If you're having trouble with Gaskul, you should totally be playing Worldclaimer here, because his ability is natural Gaskul counter, right? So you can certainly play the Worldclaimer if you want. It's just that the problem is that every time he uses the ability, he has to use 2 energy, which might be a little bit of a problem, but nevertheless, I placed a Worldclaimer in A tier before. Maybe it was a little too much. Maybe I should have placed him in B tier or something, but now I think that he's definitely A tier. Now, I might be, once again, overrating Chaos a little bit, but I think for the current meta against the Orcs, this is the way to go. This is the answer. Now, Sylar is still going to be placed in D tier, because honestly, I don't see any way that this Warlord is any competitive. It's just a random Warlord, random powers generated, and even one of his abilities, which is to deal psychic damage, is on top of that random. So like 2 random things, like first you have to get a random ability, then you use it on a random target. Sylar, I think, is just trash, and he has remained trash even after the buffs. I understand that some of you like him and may feel upset about this, but it is what it is. Now, next we go to the Eldar, and last time I think I made a major mistake with the Eldar. I placed Keltok above Medreal Galen. I think that was a big mistake from my side, because even though Keltok is pretty nice, I think that Galen is a much better pick. I would place Keltok into the B tier, maybe somewhere in the middle of the Ultramarines. I think he's even more consistent than them. I would even place him a little higher to the Ultramarines right now, mainly because Eldar are also pretty nice against the Orcs because of the Eldritch Storm and other shenanigans. It's just that Keltok is very slow, and he can't really deal with Orcs as well as Medreal Galen can. Now, Medreal Galen, I'm not sure I think I would even place him above Imhotep here. The very good thing about Medreal Galen right now is that she's also a Tempo Warlord, and on top of that does have that Eldritch Storm and other shenanigans. It's just that playing Eldar correctly is a little more difficult than maybe some factions. In general, I think, however, Medreal Galen's ability to just drop troops and keep swarming the board is really good in general, because it still gives you Spirit Stones by the fact that after they get removed, you just gain them, and there's only a few Warlords who can just take out the unit and the Spirit Stone on top. So I think that the Eldar are in a very interesting spot, and they can surely do some work. And they're also pretty good when it comes to fighting the Orcs. I'm not saying that they're better than the Orcs, but they're surely in a nice spot to compete with them. Now, Eliak Zephyr Blade, last time I placed him in D tier. I'm going to move him up to C tier, honestly. I think that he has a pretty interesting ability now to give the whole board Shuriken. It's much better than what he had. He also has 40 HP. I think he's okay, but he's still not as good as you really expect, because he really needs a setup, he needs a board, And the abilities of Keltok and Midriel Galen are just superior to his. He just does not have something that would give him a huge advantage. He will only have a huge advantage if he has a board advantage, and that board advantage is something you need to build. So I would say that Zephyr Blade is just C tier. I should have placed him in C tier before I place him too low, but I still think that he will just stay in the C tier, nothing much. Now, there's the second big mistake I made last time, and that is the Swarmlord into C tier that I placed. Some of you commented that I was severely underestimating this guy, and oh, you were right. Boy, you were right about that. Swarmlord is really, really good, and I'm gonna put him in A tier, maybe at the bottom, but at the bottom simply because the Orcs are the most terrible matchup for Swarmlord, and right now Orcs are swarming the ladder. However, Swarmlord himself is really, really powerful. It's just that the problem with the Swarmlord is that playing him is pretty difficult. I found him to be the most difficult to play out of the all of the Warlords that I've tried until now, because making decisions is very crucial, and on top of that, he doesn't have like one good deck. His deck always changes depending on the meta and the situation. Like, for example, when there was the Ultramarine meta, you would more run like the Assassin build with a lot of stealth units that would just one shot out of stealth, because Ultramarines didn't really have a lot to deal with that. Now you need to run more big bugs, and you need to run more AoE because of the Orcs. Sometimes you need to run more draw, sometimes you need to run this, that. So it's very, very difficult to really get to master this guy, but once you kind of get a hang of him, I think that he can be a pretty good Warlord, and he can even deal with the Orcs under certain situations. I have an okay like win rate against the Orcs with him, I think. So the problem that usually I do place with the Swarmlord right now is actually, funny enough, Oricon the Diviner, because as I've said, Oricon and Diviner is like in general very oppressive with his Scarabs. Like, I think he's like a little bit underrated, but he's also pretty disgusting, so I don't know if we should be promoting the gameplay with Oricon the Diviner. But anyway, I would place Swarmlord in A tier, and Neurotrope would stay in B. However, I would place Neurotrope now higher than the Marines. Neurotrope is now in a much better spot in terms of the fact that no longer gets burst by Ultramarines like instantly. It's just that he does also struggle with the Orcs, because as I said, Tyranids struggle with the Orcs. Why? Because Orcs have a lot of removal that goes through stealth, which is one of the most abusive things that the Tyranids have, right? No mocking about, Will of Gork, Scorcha Assault, all the mobs that deal like damage to random targets. So it's pretty difficult for Tyranids to really keep up with the Orcs. So that's what puts Neurotrope down a bit. I think if the Orcs were like nerfed or something, Tyranids might have even gone up to S tier at a point. Now, the final Warlord, and another bit of a mistake that I did last time, it was placing Tervigon in the B tier. I think Tervigon goes into the C tier. Actually, if I were to like place Warlords here, I would say maybe this is the order that I would put them in. Tervigon is fun. Tervigon is definitely one of the most fun Warlords that the Tyranids have. It's just that he's not that reliable, you know? Because right now, Swarm Tyranids is not the way to go. The way to go right now, I think, is the Synapse Tyranids, so you are not going to have that much fun with Tervigon. Maybe if one day we'll see a buff to High Fleet Leviathan, then we might see some things going. So, without further ado, gentlemen, this is the tier list. This is how it changed, in my opinion, compared to the other tier list that I have right over here. So this is the old one and this is the new one. So what do you think? Comment your opinion, what you agree with, what you disagree with, is your experience, and what would you like to see in the future. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.